Admiral Marcus Thompson walked through the corridors of Naval Special Warfare Command with the confidence of a man who had spent 35 years climbing the military ladder. His chest displayed ribbons from 3 wars, and his reputation preceded him wherever he went. At 62, he had earned his position through decades of tactical brilliance and unwavering dedication to the Navy. But on this particular Tuesday morning in San Diego, something would shake his world in a way no enemy fire ever could. Thompson had been called to review a classified operation that had gone sideways 6 months earlier. The mission involved a hostage rescue in Somalia that should have been straightforward for the elite SEAL Team 6 operators involved. Instead, it had turned into something the Pentagon was still trying to understand. As he settled into the briefing room, Thompson noticed something unusual. The normally stoic SEAL commanders who filled the chairs around the conference table seemed different. There was an energy in the room he couldn't quite place. These were men who had stared death in the face countless times, yet they appeared almost nervous. Lieutenant Commander Jake Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran with scars that told stories of battles across 3 continents, was fidgeting with his coffee cup. Master Chief Petty Officer Tom Chen, known for his ice-cold demeanor under fire, kept glancing at his watch. Even Captain Sarah Martinez, one of the toughest officers Thompson had ever worked with, seemed unusually tense. The briefing began with standard military precision. Charts appeared on the wall screens showing satellite imagery of a compound in Mogadishu, where American contractors had been held hostage. The mission parameters seemed routine for operators of this caliber: infiltrate, extract, exfiltrate. Thompson had overseen hundreds of similar operations. Then Rodriguez cleared his throat and said something that made Thompson's coffee grow cold in his hands. "Sir, before we continue with the technical aspects of the operation, there's something you need to understand. This mission succeeded because of someone who isn't in any of our official records. Someone who saved our lives when everything went wrong." Thompson raised an eyebrow. In 3 decades of military service, he had never heard of unauthorized personnel being involved in classified SEAL operations. The very idea went against every protocol he knew. "Explain," Thompson said simply. The room fell silent except for the hum of air conditioning. Rodriguez exchanged glances with the other operators before continuing. "Her name is Elena Vasquez, sir. She's not military. Never has been. But every SEAL in this room knows her name. Every operator who's worked the Horn of Africa in the past 5 years has a story about her." Thompson frowned. He prided himself on knowing every asset, every contact, every significant player in their operational theater. The name Elena Vasquez meant absolutely nothing to him. "I've never heard of this person," Thompson said slowly. "And I've been briefed on every civilian asset we work with in that region." Master Chief Chen leaned forward, his weathered hands clasped in front of him. "That's because she doesn't work for us, Admiral. She doesn't work for anyone. But when American lives are on the line, she appears." The Admiral felt a familiar tension building in his shoulders. He didn't like mysteries, especially ones involving unauthorized personnel in active combat zones. "Are you telling me that a civilian, someone with no official connection to our operations, somehow became involved in a classified SEAL mission?" Captain Martinez spoke up, her voice carrying a respect Thompson rarely heard when his officers discussed civilian contractors. "Sir, Elena Vasquez isn't just any civilian. She saved more American lives in East Africa than most of our official assets combined. The locals call her La Sombra, the Shadow. She appears when soldiers need her most, then vanishes again." Thompson set down his coffee cup with more force than necessary. "I don't deal in ghost stories, Captain. I deal in facts, operational reports, and accountability. If this woman was involved in our mission, where's the paperwork? Where's the background check? Where's the official authorization?" The silence that followed his questions was telling. Rodriguez finally broke it. "There is no paperwork, sir. Elena doesn't exist in our system because she's never asked to be part of it. But 6 months ago in Mogadishu, when our intelligence was wrong and our escape routes were compromised, she's the reason we're all sitting in this room instead of in body bags." Thompson stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. His mind was racing through the implications. Unauthorized personnel in classified operations could end careers and compromise national security. Yet the operators in this room, men and women he trusted with his life, were speaking of this mystery woman with something approaching reverence. I want a full report on everything that happened in Somalia, Thompson ordered. And I want to know everything about this Elena Vasquez. Everything. Her background, her connections, her motivations, and how she keeps inserting herself into our operations without proper authorization. Rodriguez nodded slowly. Yes, sir. But Admiral, with respect, you're asking us to explain someone who might not be explainable through normal channels. Elena Vasquez operates by her own rules in her own way. The only thing we know for certain is that she's on our side. As the meeting adjourned and the operators filed out, Thompson remained standing at the window looking out at the Pacific Ocean. In 35 years of military service, he had encountered enemy agents, double agents, contractors, and every type of military professional imaginable. But he had never encountered anyone quite like the woman his most trusted operators called a guardian angel, a woman whose very existence challenged everything he thought he knew about how the shadowy world of special operations really worked. The mystery of Elena Vasquez had just become Admiral Thompson's most pressing concern. 3 days later, Admiral Thompson found himself in a secure communications room, speaking with contacts he hadn't talked to in years. The Elena Vasquez investigation had become his personal obsession, and what he was discovering made less sense with each phone call. His first stop had been the CIA station chief in Djibouti, a sharp woman named Patricia Hayes who knew every player in the Horn of Africa intelligence game. Elena Vasquez? Hayes had repeated over the encrypted line. Admiral, I've been working this region for 8 years, and I can tell you definitively that no one by that name has ever appeared on our radar. We track every Western civilian operating in Somalia, especially anyone with the kind of capabilities you're describing. But when Thompson called Colonel Mike Stevens, a Green Beret commander who had rotated through multiple African postings, the conversation took a different turn. Jesus, Admiral, where did you hear that name? Stevens had said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. Elena Vasquez. Look, I can't talk about this over normal channels, but if you're asking about her, then you already know something went very wrong somewhere. Now Thompson sat alone in his office at 2 a.m., surrounded by files that officially didn't exist. Through back channels and personal favors, he had managed to gather fragments of information that painted a picture of someone who shouldn't exist in the modern world. The first documented mention he could find was from 2018, in a classified after-action report from a Marine Force recon team that had been ambushed near the Kenya-Somalia border. The team leader, Captain David Walsh, had written a single line that had somehow escaped the censors. Civilian female, identity unknown, provided critical fire support and extraction assistance. When Thompson tracked down Walsh, who was now teaching at Quantico, the Marine had gone pale at the mention of Elena's name. Sir, I've never talked about what happened that day, Walsh had said during their secure phone call. But that woman. She appeared out of nowhere when we were pinned down by Al-Shabaab fighters. Perfect English, but with an accent I couldn't place. She knew exactly where our enemy was positioned, had better intel than we did, and could shoot like she'd been born with a rifle in her hands. What did she look like? Thompson had pressed. Maybe 35, 40 years old. Dark hair, olive skin. Could have been Italian, Spanish, maybe Middle Eastern. But Admiral, what I remember most is her eyes. She had the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen too much combat. And she moved like she'd been doing this forever. Each conversation had revealed another piece of the puzzle, but also deepened the mystery. A Navy corpsman in Bahrain remembered treating her for a gunshot wound in 2019, but had no record of her ever being admitted to the base hospital. A logistics officer at Camp Lemonnier swore she had helped coordinate a medical evacuation in 2020, but security footage from that day had mysteriously disappeared. The most unsettling conversation had been with Master Sergeant Rosa Martinez, a Air Force pararescue operator who had encountered Elena during a humanitarian mission in Ethiopia. Admiral, Martinez had said, Elena Vasquez saved 23 Ethiopian children during a refugee camp attack. But when I tried to recommend her for a civilian medal, I was told there was no record of her existence. No passport, no visa, no entry into the country. According to official records, she was never there. Thompson pushed back from his desk and rubbed his tired eyes. Every lead he followed created 2 more questions. Elena appeared in combat zones across East Africa, spoke multiple languages fluently, had medical training that impressed military doctors, and possessed tactical knowledge that rivaled seasoned special operations veterans. Yet she had no official identity that anyone could trace. His secure phone buzzed. It was Rodriguez, calling from the team room at Naval Special Warfare. "Admiral, I've been thinking about your questions regarding Elena. There's someone you need to talk to. Senior Chief Petty Officer Mike Harrison. He's been in the teams for 15 years and he's had more contact with Elena than anyone else I know. Why hasn't he been part of these briefings?" "Because he's been on medical leave, sir. He was wounded in the Somalia operation. Elena saved his life specifically." "But Admiral, there's something else. Harrison has been trying to track down Elena's background for 3 years. What he's found, it doesn't make sense." 20 minutes later, Thompson was driving across San Diego to a small apartment complex where Harrison was recovering from his injuries. The senior chief answered the door on crutches, his leg still healing from shrapnel wounds. Harrison's apartment was sparse except for one wall that looked like something from a detective movie. Photos, maps, newspaper clippings, and handwritten notes were connected by red string. At the center of it all was a single grainy photograph of a woman with dark hair and intelligent eyes. "That's her," Harrison said, noticing Thompson's stare. "Elena Vasquez, or at least, that's the name she's used for the past 5 years. You've been investigating her?" Harrison nodded slowly. "After she pulled me out of that firefight in Mogadishu, I couldn't let it go. This woman risked her life to save mine, and I didn't even know her real name. So I started digging." He limped over to the wall and pointed to a news article from Barcelona, dated 15 years earlier. "Elena Vasquez was a translator for Doctors Without Borders. She was killed in Syria in 2010 when her convoy hit an IED. There's a grave with her name on it in Spain." Thompson felt his blood go cold. "Are you saying someone is using a dead woman's identity?" "I'm saying whoever the woman we know is, she's not Elena Vasquez. But Admiral, that's not the strangest part." Harrison pointed to another section of his wall where medical reports and financial records were pinned up. "I've found traces of similar women operating in other conflict zones. Different names, different backgrounds, but the same pattern. They appear when American lives are at stake. They have capabilities that shouldn't exist in civilians, and then they vanish." "How many?" "At least 6, maybe more. Bosnia in the 1990s, Iraq in 2004, Afghanistan in 2011, Libya in 2012, and now East Africa since 2018. Thompson stared at the wall of evidence, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. "Senior Chief, what exactly are you suggesting?" Harrison met his eyes directly. "I'm suggesting that whoever these women are, they're not random civilians who happen to be in the wrong place at the right time. They're professionals, and they're part of something bigger than anything in our official channels." As Thompson drove back to base that night, one thought kept circling in his mind. If Elena Vasquez wasn't who she claimed to be, and if there were others like her operating in the shadows of America's wars, then who were they working for? And more importantly, why had no one in the official intelligence community ever heard of them? Admiral Thompson's quest for answers led him to a place he had hoped never to visit again, the basement archives of the Pentagon, where classified documents went to die. The musty smell of old paper and the hum of fluorescent lights brought back memories of his early career, when he was just another young officer trying to prove himself. But now, 35 years later, he was hunting for something that officially didn't exist. Dr. Margaret Chen, the Pentagon's chief archivist, was a small woman in her 70s who had spent 4 decades managing the military's most sensitive documents. She looked at Thompson over her reading glasses with the expression of someone who had seen countless officers chase ghosts in her archives. "Admiral, you're asking me to find records of people who may not have records," she said, leading him through rows of filing cabinets that stretched as far as the eye could see. "But there is one place we might look." She stopped at a section marked with a simple placard. "Unacknowledged operations, 1990 present." These are files from missions that were so classified they were never officially acknowledged. Sometimes people appear in these reports who don't exist anywhere else in our system. Thompson spent the next 6 hours reading through operations he had never heard of, in countries he didn't know America had operated in. The reports were written in the careful language of plausible deniability, where facts were suggested rather than stated. Then he found it, buried in a report from Bosnia. 1995 was a single paragraph that made his hands shake. Civilian asset, designation Nightingale 1, provided critical intelligence during Operation Silent Thunder. Asset demonstrated exceptional capabilities in hostile environment extraction. Recommend continued monitoring. Note: Asset operates independently of all known intelligence services. Background verification impossible through standard channels. The next mention was from Iraq, 2004. Individual known as Nightingale 3 assisted in rescue of captured pilots near Fallujah. Subject displayed advanced medical and tactical training. Attempted post-operation debrief unsuccessful. Subject departed before contact could be established. Afghanistan, 2011. Nightingale 5 provided overwatch and extraction support during compromised infiltration mission. Local nationals refer to individual as guardian angel. Physical description matches pattern established in previous Nightingale encounters. Thompson's coffee grew cold as he read report after report spanning 2 decades. The women, and they were always women, appeared in the most dangerous situations, saved American lives, then vanished before anyone could properly debrief them. But the most chilling report was the most recent one. From Libya in 2012, Nightingale 6 prevented capture of CIA operatives during Benghazi incident. Subject exhibited knowledge of classified extraction routes and safe house locations. Security review recommended. Note: Subject claimed to be Elena Vasquez, but fingerprint analysis suggests this identity has been used by at least 3 different individuals over past 5 years. Thompson closed the file and leaned back in his chair. The evidence was impossible to ignore. There was a network of women operating in the shadows of America's conflicts, women who appeared when soldiers needed them most, then disappeared like smoke. His secure phone buzzed. It was a text from Rodriguez. "Admiral, you need to get to the base hospital immediately. Elena is here." Thompson's heart rate spiked. He had been chasing a ghost for a week, and now she was just 20 minutes away. The drive to the Naval Medical Center felt like the longest of Thompson's life. Rodriguez met him in the parking lot, his face grim. "She was brought in 3 hours ago," Rodriguez explained as they walked quickly toward the emergency entrance. Somali fishermen found her on a beach near Mogadishu, half dead from blood loss. The State Department managed to get her medically evacuated here. Why wasn't I notified immediately? Because we weren't sure it was really her? "Admiral, the woman in that hospital bed doesn't match the description any of us gave you." Thompson stopped walking. "What do you mean?" The Elena Vasquez we knew was maybe 35, 40 years old. This woman is in her 70s. They took the elevator to the secure wing of the hospital, where only personnel with the highest clearances were allowed. Through a window in the door, Thompson saw her for the first time. Elena Vasquez lay unconscious in the hospital bed, connected to machines that monitored her vital signs. Rodriguez was right. She was much older than the woman described in the SEAL reports. Her hair was silver white, her face lined with wrinkles that spoke of decades in harsh climates. But even unconscious, there was something formidable about her. Her hands, visible above the blanket, were scarred and calloused in ways that suggested a lifetime of hard use. Dr. Jennifer Kim, the attending physician, joined them outside the room. "Admiral, this woman is remarkable," Dr. Kim said, consulting her tablet. "She has scars from at least 15 different gunshot wounds, evidence of multiple bone breaks that healed without proper medical attention, and muscle density that suggests intensive physical training well into her 60s. Has she been conscious?" "Briefly about an hour ago. She asked for water, then said something in what sounded like Arabic. When I asked her name, she just smiled and said, 'I'm whoever you need me to be.'" Thompson stared through the window at the woman who had become his obsession. "Doctor, have you been able to establish her identity?" "That's the strange part, Admiral. We ran her fingerprints and they came back with a match for Elena Vasquez, but also for Maria Santos, Isabella Romano, and Sarah Hassan. Either this woman has been using multiple identities or our database has been compromised." Rodriguez stepped closer to the window. "Admiral, there's something else. When they brought her belongings from Somalia, they found this." He handed Thompson a waterproof case about the size of a book. Inside were documents in multiple languages, maps of regions where American forces operated, and photographs. But what made Thompson's breath catch were the photos themselves. They showed the woman in the hospital bed, but in different time periods. One photo, clearly from the 1990s based on the equipment and uniforms visible, showed her treating wounded soldiers. Another, from what looked like Iraq in the early 2000s, showed her providing sniper overwatch for a convoy, and in every photo, she looked exactly the same age she appeared now, somewhere in her 70s. "Admiral," Rodriguez said quietly, "either this woman has aged remarkably well, or these photos suggest something that doesn't make sense." Thompson closed the case carefully. He had spent 35 years in military service, had seen advanced technology and classified programs that would amaze civilians. But he had never encountered anything that challenged his understanding of reality like this. A nurse emerged from the room. "She's awake and asking to speak with whoever is in charge." Thompson looked through the window again. Elena Vasquez was sitting up in bed, her gray eyes alert and focused directly on him. Even from behind the glass, there was an intensity to her gaze that made him feel like she was seeing straight through him. "Admiral," Rodriguez said, "are you ready to meet the woman who doesn't exist?" Thompson straightened his uniform and reached for the door handle. After a week of chasing shadows and impossible reports, he was finally going to get answers from the woman who had saved countless American lives while remaining invisible to official channels. But as he stepped into the hospital room, he had the distinct feeling that Elena Vasquez had been waiting for this meeting much longer than he had. Elena Vasquez studied Admiral Thompson with the same intensity he had observed through the window. Her gray eyes moved from his face to his uniform ribbons, then to Rodriguez standing behind him. When she spoke, her voice carried an accent Thompson couldn't place. European, perhaps, but filtered through decades of speaking multiple languages. "Admiral Marcus Thompson," she said, not asking but stating. 35 years of service, 3 tours in combat zones, decorated for valor in the Persian Gulf. You have 2 daughters and a grandson you haven't seen in 6 months because of operational security. Thompson felt his jaw tighten. The personal information she had just recited wasn't classified, but it wasn't exactly public either. "Ms. Vasquez, I think we need to have a conversation about who you are and what you've been doing in our operational theaters." Elena smiled, but it wasn't a warm expression. It was the smile of someone who had been having conversations like this for decades. "Please, Admiral, sit down. You've been looking for me for a week now. The least I can do is satisfy some of your curiosity." Thompson took the chair beside her bed, while Rodriguez remained standing near the door. The heart monitor beside Elena's bed showed a steady, remarkably calm rhythm for someone who had nearly died on a Somali beach 3 days earlier. "Let's start with the basics," Thompson said. "Elena Vasquez died in Syria in 2010, so who are you really?" "I am Elena Vasquez," she replied simply. "I am also Maria Santos, Isabella Romano, and Sarah Hassan. I have been all of them when circumstances required it." "That's not an answer." Elena adjusted herself in the hospital bed, wincing slightly from her injuries. "Admiral, in your 35 years of service, how many times have you encountered something that didn't fit into the normal categories of military intelligence?" Thompson considered the question. "A few times. Unusual weapons, unexpected tactics, intelligence that came from sources we couldn't identify." "And what did you do when faced with these anomalies?" "We adapted. We found ways to use the information without fully understanding where it came from." Elena nodded approvingly. "Exactly. You understood that in war, useful resources are more important than perfect knowledge. So let me ask you this. In the past 25 years, how many American service members do you think I have helped save?" Rodriguez stepped forward. "Admiral, our preliminary count puts it at over 300 confirmed saves. But that's just what we can document." Elena's eyes moved to Rodriguez. "Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, your team was pinned down in that compound in Mogadishu for 6 hours before I arrived. Your sniper, Petty Officer Jenkins, had taken a round through his shoulder. Your radio operator had been hit by shrapnel. You were down to your last magazine when I provided overwatch from the building across the street." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "You knew details about our tactical situation that weren't in any briefing." "Because I had been watching your operation for 3 days. I knew the intelligence you had been given was faulty. I knew the compound had twice as many defenders as you expected, and I knew that your extraction plan would put you directly in the path of an Al-Shabaab patrol that was moving to reinforce their position. Thompson leaned forward. How could you know all of that? Even our satellite surveillance didn't pick up the additional defenders. Elena was quiet for a long moment, seeming to weigh how much to reveal. Admiral, what do you know about the Cold War program called Operation Nightingale? The name hit Thompson like a physical blow. He had heard whispers of Nightingale during his early career. Rumors of a program so classified that even admitting you had heard the name could end your career. I know it's above my clearance level, Thompson said carefully. Operation Nightingale ended officially in 1991, Elena continued. It was designed to place assets in conflict zones who could operate independently of traditional intelligence services. People who could move through dangerous areas without official support, who could blend into local populations, who could be denied by their own governments if captured. Rodriguez looked confused. You're talking about deep cover agents? Elena shook her head. Deeper than that. Nightingale operatives were given new identities, new histories, sometimes even new appearances. They were trained to survive in hostile territory for years at a time, and they were given one primary mission: keep American service members alive no matter the cost. Thompson felt pieces of the puzzle beginning to fit together. The women in Bosnia, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, they were all Nightingale operatives. We were the last generation of the program. 12 women, recruited from military and intelligence backgrounds, trained for 5 years in language, medicine, weapons, and survival. We were inserted into various global hotspots in the early 1990s. But the program ended in 1991, Thompson protested. Elena's smile returned, and this time there was sadness in it. The program ended. We did not. We continued our mission because American soldiers continued to die in places where official help couldn't reach them. The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of medical equipment. Thompson tried to process what he was hearing. A black operations program that had officially ended 30 years ago, but whose operatives continued working in the shadows, saving American lives without acknowledgement or support. How many of you are still active? Rodriguez asked. I am the last, Elena said quietly. Maria died in Iraq in 2006. Sarah was killed in Afghanistan in 2010. Isabella... Elena paused, her composure slipping slightly. Isabella died in Libya during the Benghazi incident. She saved your CIA colleagues, but she didn't make it out. Thompson understood now why his investigation had been so difficult. He wasn't looking for one person operating under multiple identities. He had been following the trail of several different women who had all used the same cover identities as they were lost in America's wars. Why are you telling me this now? Thompson asked. Elena looked directly at him, and for the first time Thompson saw exhaustion in her eyes. Because I'm dying, Admiral. This last mission in Somalia was supposed to be routine, extract information about American hostages. But my body is 73 years old, even though my training makes me fight like someone half that age. I can't continue much longer. What do you want from us? Nothing, Elena said. I want to give you something. For 30 years I have gathered intelligence on terrorist networks, weapons smuggling operations, and planned attacks against American interests. Information that your official channels could never access because of diplomatic constraints or operational security. She gestured toward the nightstand, where a small device sat next to her water cup. That contains everything. Names, locations, financial networks, planned operations. Enough intelligence to keep your teams busy for the next 5 years. Thompson stared at the device. Why give this to us now? Elena closed her eyes, suddenly looking every one of her 73 years. Because someone needs to continue the mission. And because I'm tired of being a ghost. The heart monitor beside her bed began to beep more rapidly, and a nurse entered the room to check her vitals. Admiral, Elena said as the nurse adjusted her IV. There's one more thing you need to know. The Nightingale program may have ended officially, but someone has been watching us all these years. Someone has been supporting us, providing us with intelligence and resources. Who? Elena's eyes were closing as the painkillers in her IV began to take effect. Find out who has been funding safe houses across 3 continents, who has been maintaining our cover identities, who has been cleaning up our messes for 30 years. When you find that person, Admiral, you'll understand why Elena Vasquez could never officially exist. As Elena drifted into medicated sleep, Thompson picked up the device from her nightstand. In his hands was potentially the most valuable intelligence package the Navy had ever received, given freely by a woman who had dedicated her life to protecting American soldiers. But her final words echoed in his mind. Someone had been supporting the Nightingale operatives for 3 decades. Someone with the resources and authority to maintain black operations funding long after the official program ended. Someone who had been operating in the shadows of the American military establishment, and who might still be watching him right now. Admiral Thompson spent the next 48 hours in a secure communications room, analyzing the intelligence device Elena had given him. What he found made his 35 years of military experience seem like basic training. The device contained terabytes of data, organized with military precision. Financial records showing money flowing through dozens of shell companies. Intercepted communications between terrorist leaders in languages Thompson had never heard of. Detailed maps of smuggling routes that connected conflicts across 3 continents. But most importantly, it contained something Thompson had never expected to see: complete operational records of every Nightingale mission since 1991. Master Chief Chen joined him on the second day, bringing coffee and the kind of grim expression that meant he had discovered something significant. "Admiral, I've been cross-referencing the intelligence in Elena's files with our own operational records," Chen said, setting down a thick folder. "The pattern is disturbing." Thompson looked up from the computer screen where he had been reading Elena's personal mission log. "Explain." Every major terrorist attack against American interests in the past 15 years, Elena knew about it in advance. Her files contain warnings, target assessments, and tactical recommendations that were sent to someone in our intelligence community. Were these warnings acted upon? Chen's face grew darker. Some were. The ones that were acted upon prevented attacks that would have killed hundreds of American soldiers and civilians. But Admiral, at least 6 major attacks occurred exactly as Elena predicted, with no apparent effort made to prevent them. Thompson set down his coffee cup. "Are you suggesting someone received these warnings and chose not to act?" "I'm suggesting someone has been using Elena and her team as an intelligence source while maintaining plausible deniability. They got credit for the successes and could deny knowledge of the failures." The secure phone on Thompson's desk rang. It was Rodriguez calling from Elena's hospital room. "Admiral, you need to get here immediately. Elena is asking for you, and she's different, more alert than she's been since she arrived." 20 minutes later, Thompson found Elena sitting up in her hospital bed, her gray eyes sharp and focused. The monitors showed her vital signs were stronger than they had been since her arrival. "Admiral," she said as he entered the room, "I see you've been reading my files. Have you found what you were looking for?" Thompson took his usual chair beside her bed. "I found more questions than answers. Your intelligence is remarkable, detailed, accurate, actionable. But Elena, some of the warnings you sent weren't acted upon." Elena nodded slowly. "I know. For 30 years I sent intelligence reports to a single contact in the American defense establishment. Some information was used to save lives. Some was ignored for reasons I was never told." "Who was your contact?" Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring out the hospital window at the Pacific Ocean. "Admiral, what do you know about the position of Deputy Director for Special Activities?" Thompson frowned. "It's a classified position within the Defense Intelligence Agency. Very few people even know it exists. The Deputy Director for Special Activities has been my handler since 1993. Every piece of intelligence I gathered, every mission report I filed, every request for support, it all went through that office." Thompson felt a chill run down his spine. "Elena, who currently holds that position?" Before she could answer, the door to the hospital room opened. Thompson turned to see a woman in her 60s enter, wearing a tailored business suit and carrying herself with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to authority. "Admiral Thompson," the woman said, "I believe it's time we were formally introduced. I'm Deputy Director Margaret Foster, Defense Intelligence Agency." Thompson stood slowly, his mind racing. He recognized Foster's name from high-level briefings, but he had never met her personally. She was a legend in intelligence circles, a career officer who had survived multiple administrations and maintained influence across decades of changing political leadership. "Director Foster," Thompson said carefully, "what brings you to San Diego?" Foster approached Elena's bedside with the familiarity of someone who had been managing this relationship for years. Elena called me, Admiral. She said it was time for you to understand the complete picture. Elena looked between Thompson and Foster. Admiral, meet my handler, the person who has been supporting the Nightingale program for 30 years after it officially ended. Thompson felt like he was watching a chess game where he didn't understand the rules. Director Foster, are you confirming that you've been running unauthorized black operations for 3 decades? Foster smiled, but there was no humor in it. Admiral, nothing I have done was unauthorized. It was simply unacknowledged. There's a significant difference. She moved to the window, looking out at the naval base beyond. When Operation Nightingale ended in 1991, I was a young analyst who understood that the threat to American forces wasn't ending with the Cold War. If anything, it was becoming more complex and dangerous. Thompson crossed his arms. So you took it upon yourself to continue an officially terminated program? I took it upon myself to protect American lives, Foster replied sharply. The 12 Nightingale operatives were already in position, already trained, already effective. Abandoning them would have been both wasteful and immoral. Elena spoke from her hospital bed, her voice carrying decades of weariness. Margaret saved my life more times than I can count, Admiral. Safe houses, extraction routes, medical support, intelligence updates, all provided through unofficial channels. How did you fund this? Thompson demanded. Black operations require significant resources. Foster turned from the window, her expression showing a mixture of pride and regret. Have you ever wondered why certain defense contractors consistently overcharge for equipment by exactly 12.5%? Or why some military construction projects always come in precisely $2.3 million over budget? Thompson's blood went cold as he understood what she was implying. You've been skimming money from legitimate military contracts. I've been redirecting a fraction of defense spending to its most effective use, keeping American soldiers alive, Foster corrected. Over 30 years, the Nightingale program cost less than a single F-35 fighter jet, but it saved thousands of lives. Rodriguez, who had been silent throughout this exchange, stepped forward. Director Foster, with respect, you're describing systematic fraud against the United States military. Foster's laugh was bitter. Lieutenant Commander, I'm describing the only way to run effective operations in a system that prioritizes political cover over mission success. Do you know how many congressional hearings would have been required to officially approve continued Nightingale operations? How many committee briefings? How many opportunities for operational security to be compromised? Elena struggled to sit up straighter in her hospital bed. Admiral, Margaret is dying too. Lung cancer. She has maybe 6 months left. That's why she's here, to transfer operational control to someone else. Thompson looked between the two women, his mind reeling. Transfer control to whom? Foster reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder marked with classification stamps Thompson had never seen before. To you, Admiral Thompson, you've proven over the past week that you have the persistence to uncover the truth and the integrity to handle it properly. You want me to take over an illegal black operations program? I want you to take over the most effective counterterrorism operation in American history, Foster replied. Elena has given you intelligence that will prevent attacks and save lives. But intelligence is only valuable if someone acts on it. Thompson walked to the window, staring out at the naval base where he had spent years of his career following orders and working within the system. What you're describing is treason. What I'm describing is patriotism at its purest form, Foster countered. No political considerations, no bureaucratic delays, no committee oversight that could compromise missions. Just protecting American lives by any means necessary. Elena's voice was growing weaker, but her words were clear. Admiral, in 3 days, terrorists are planning to attack a convoy carrying American diplomats in Nigeria. The attack will kill 12 people, including 2 Marine guards who have children. Your official intelligence won't detect this threat for another week. Too late to prevent it. Thompson turned from the window. How can you know that? Because I still have contacts throughout West Africa who trust Elena Vasquez, but would never speak to official American intelligence, Foster explained. The Nightingale Network isn't just about the operatives. It's about the relationships they built over decades of earning trust in hostile territory. Rodriguez looked at the folder in Foster's hands. What exactly would taking over this program involve? Foster opened the folder, revealing organizational charts, financial accounts, and contact information for assets around the world. It would involve maintaining support for the intelligence network Elena built. It would involve making decisions about when to act on time-sensitive intelligence. And it would involve finding a way to transition these operations into official channels when politically feasible. Thompson stared at the folder, understanding that he was being offered something that could define the rest of his career, and possibly destroy it. "Admiral," Elena said softly, "I've spent 30 years operating without official recognition, without backup, without the certainty that anyone would remember me if I died in some desert or jungle. I've done it because I believed American lives were worth that sacrifice." Foster closed the folder and held it out to Thompson. "The question, Admiral, is whether you believe the same thing." Thompson looked at the folder, then at Elena lying in the hospital bed, then at Rodriguez standing at attention despite the moral complexity of everything they had just heard. Outside the window, he could see young sailors and Marines going about their daily duties, unaware that their lives might depend on decisions made in hospital rooms by people who didn't officially exist. The folder felt heavier than it should have when Thompson finally reached out to take it. 3 weeks later, Admiral Thompson sat in his office at 3 a.m., staring at intelligence reports that officially didn't exist. The folder Margaret Foster had given him contained access codes to financial accounts, contact information for assets in 16 countries, and operational protocols that had been refined over 30 years of shadow operations. He had spent sleepless nights wrestling with the decision, but Elena's prediction about the attack in Nigeria had forced his hand. The convoy attack had occurred exactly as she had described, 12 dead, including 2 young Marines with families. Thompson had watched the news coverage knowing he could have prevented it. Now he was committed to something that felt like stepping off a cliff in complete darkness. His secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Foster. "Asset in Beirut reports Iranian weapons shipment arriving Mogadishu tomorrow. 3-truck convoy. American hostages being moved to new location. Window for rescue closes in 48 hours. Thompson looked at his computer screen, where he had been drafting an operational request through official channels. Even expedited through emergency protocols, approval for a rescue mission would take at least a week. By then, the hostages would be moved to a location they might never find. But he now had something his predecessors never had access to: Elena's network. Thompson opened a different communication channel, one that connected to a secure server Foster had shown him how to access. His message was simple: request immediate reconnaissance and support for hostage rescue operation, Somalia grid coordinates attached. The response came back in less than an hour. Reconnaissance complete. 3 American contractors confirmed at location. Local security light but moving operation planned for dawn. Can provide overwatch and extraction support if official rescue team deployed. Thompson stared at the message, understanding that he was looking at intelligence capabilities that exceeded anything in the official American arsenal. Whoever Elena's contact in Mogadishu was, they had managed to locate and confirm the hostages in under an hour. He reached for his official phone and called the Pentagon's Joint Operations Center. "This is Admiral Thompson. I have actionable intelligence on American hostages in Somalia. I need a rescue team authorized and deployed within 12 hours. The duty officer's response was predictable. "Sir, we'll need to verify the intelligence through official channels before authorizing any rescue operation." "Colonel, I'm telling you that American lives are at stake and we have a limited window to save them." "Admiral, without confirmed intelligence from CIA or NSA sources, we can't authorize a cross-border operation." Thompson ended the call and stared at his office wall, where his 35 years of commendations and service ribbons reminded him of a career built on following proper procedures. Now he was being asked to operate outside those procedures to save lives that the system couldn't protect. His personal phone rang. It was Rodriguez calling from home. "Admiral, I've been thinking about our conversation with Elena. Have you made a decision about Director Foster's proposal?" Thompson looked at the intelligence report on his desk. "Jake, if you had intelligence that could save American lives, but acting on that intelligence required you to operate outside official channels, what would you do?" Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. "Sir, I'd save the lives, but I'd also understand that there would be consequences. Even if those consequences could end your career. Admiral, I didn't join the Navy to protect my career. I joined to protect American lives." Thompson made his decision. He opened the secure channel to Elena's network and typed a message that would change everything. Request full support for hostage rescue. Official team will be 3 hours behind optimal timeline. Can your assets provide interim security? The response was immediate. Assets in position. Will maintain hostage security until official rescue arrives. Recommend helicopter extraction from coordinates being transmitted separately. Over the next 18 hours, Thompson watched something that shouldn't have been possible unfold in real time. Elena's contact in Mogadishu had managed to infiltrate the compound holding the American hostages, neutralize their guards, and maintain security until a Navy SEAL team could arrive for extraction. All 3 hostages were recovered alive, and the SEALs encountered no resistance because Elena's asset had already cleared the threats. The official after-action report credited excellent intelligence and tactical planning for the mission's success. There was no mention of unauthorized support or shadow operations, but Thompson knew the truth. Without Elena's network, 3 American contractors would have died in a Somali compound. 2 days later, Foster called him on the secure line. "Admiral, congratulations on your first successful Nightingale operation. How do you feel about stepping outside the official system?" Thompson considered his answer carefully. "Like I'm betraying everything I've sworn to uphold, while simultaneously fulfilling the most important oath I've ever taken." Foster's laugh was knowing. That feeling never goes away. But neither does the knowledge that you're saving lives that the official system can't protect. "Margaret, I need to know something. In 30 years of running this program, how many operations have you authorized?" 417, Foster replied without hesitation. "Successful extractions, prevented attacks, rescued personnel, stopped weapons shipments. The Nightingale Network has been involved in protecting American interests 417 times over 3 decades. And how many times has the official system known about these operations?" Exactly 0 times until now. Thompson felt the weight of that number. 417 operations that had saved American lives, prevented terrorist attacks, and protected national interests, all conducted without any official acknowledgement or oversight. What happens when you're gone, Margaret? When Elena is gone, how does this network continue? Foster's voice grew serious. "That's why I chose you, Admiral. You have the operational experience to understand when action is necessary, the moral compass to use this capability responsibly, and the institutional knowledge to eventually transition these assets into official channels." Transition them how? That's the long-term mission, Admiral. Find a way to bring Elena's network into the official intelligence community without compromising their effectiveness or exposing them to bureaucratic delays that could cost lives. Thompson looked out his office window at the naval base, where young sailors were beginning their daily routines. Somewhere around the world, Elena's assets were watching over American interests, ready to act when the official system couldn't respond fast enough. "Margaret, there's something I need to tell you. Yesterday I authorized an operation using Elena's network. It succeeded, but I did it without congressional oversight, without interagency coordination, and without following any of the protocols I've spent my career respecting." "And how many American lives did you save?" 3 confirmed, possibly dozens more if the intelligence about planned attacks is accurate. Foster's voice carried a note of pride. "Then you're beginning to understand what Elena has been doing for 30 years. Welcome to the shadows, Admiral. Try not to lose yourself in them." As Thompson ended the call, he realized he had crossed a line he could never uncross. He was now responsible for a network of assets that existed outside official oversight, funded by redirected military spending, and capable of operations that could save American lives or destroy his career. But for the first time in weeks, he slept peacefully knowing that somewhere in the world, Elena's guardians were watching over American soldiers who would never know their names. 6 months after Elena Vasquez died quietly in the Naval Medical Center, Admiral Thompson received a phone call that would test everything he had learned about operating in the shadows. Elena had passed away peacefully on a Tuesday morning, with Rodriguez holding her hand and Thompson reading her final intelligence report. Her last words had been in Spanish, something about shadows finally finding rest. The funeral was small, just Thompson, Rodriguez, a few other SEALs who had worked with her, and Margaret Foster, who died from cancer 2 weeks later. Now Thompson sat in his office, looking at intelligence that made his stomach clench with dread. According to Elena's network, A coordinated terrorist attack was planned for 3 American military bases simultaneously, one in Germany, one in Japan, and one in Virginia. The attacks were scheduled for the 4th of July, just 72 hours away. The intelligence was detailed, credible, and came from sources that had never been wrong. But it also came through channels that officially didn't exist. Thompson had learned to navigate Elena's network over the past months. The contacts were careful, professional, and deeply committed to protecting American lives. They communicated through encrypted messages, provided actionable intelligence, and never asked for payment or recognition. But this threat was too big for shadow operations. It required official military response, congressional notification, and interagency coordination. It also required Thompson to reveal sources he had sworn to protect. His secure phone buzzed. It was General Patricia Hayes, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. "Marcus, I need you in Washington immediately. We've received credible intelligence about a planned attack on American military installations." Thompson felt his heart race. "General, what's the source of this intelligence?" "That's classified at the moment, but we need your expertise on special operations countermeasures. Can you be here tonight?" Thompson knew this was the moment he had been dreading. The intelligence Elena's network provided was so valuable that other parts of the American security establishment were beginning to notice patterns they couldn't explain. 12 hours later, Thompson sat in a secure briefing room in the Pentagon, surrounded by the highest levels of American military and intelligence leadership. General Hayes stood at the front of the room, presenting intelligence that Thompson recognized immediately. "The threat is confirmed across 3 time zones," Hayes explained, pointing to maps on the wall screen. "Coordinated attacks planned for 600 local time on July 4th. The intelligence indicates at least 40 terrorists involved, with weapons already in position near each target." Secretary of Defense James Morrison leaned forward in his chair. "General, what's the source of this intelligence?" "CIA says they have no assets who could have gathered this level of detail." Hayes looked uncomfortable. "Sir, the intelligence came through Navy Special Operations channels. Admiral Thompson, perhaps you could explain how your people developed such comprehensive threat assessment." All eyes in the room turned to Thompson. He looked around the table at men and women he had worked with for years, people he respected and trusted. In this room sat the official leadership of American military power, and they were looking to him for answers he couldn't give without compromising everything Elena had built. The intelligence comes from sources developed over long-term operations in multiple theaters, Thompson said carefully. "Assets who have proven reliable over extended periods." CIA Director Susan Chen frowned. "Admiral, we've run this intelligence through our own networks and none of our sources can confirm these details." "Are you saying the Navy has developed intelligence capabilities that exceed CIA assets?" Thompson felt sweat beading on his forehead. "I'm saying we have sources who have access to information that might not be available through traditional intelligence channels." General Hayes stepped closer to the table. "Marcus, I need you to be very clear here. Are you telling me the Navy is running unacknowledged operations that other agencies don't know about?" The room fell silent. Thompson understood that his next words would either expose Elena's network or leave 3 American military bases vulnerable to attack. He thought about Elena lying in that hospital bed, giving him intelligence that could save hundreds of lives. He thought about Margaret Foster, who had spent 30 years protecting American soldiers through operations that couldn't be officially acknowledged. He thought about the 417 successful operations that had saved American lives without anyone ever knowing they happened. "General," Thompson said slowly, "the source of this intelligence is a network of assets developed over 30 years of operations in denied areas. These assets have never provided false intelligence, and their warnings have prevented dozens of attacks on American interests." Secretary Morrison leaned back in his chair. "Are you describing a black operations program that's been running without congressional oversight?" Thompson met the secretary's eyes directly. "I'm describing a network that has kept American soldiers alive in situations where official intelligence couldn't reach them." The room erupted in whispered conversations and sharp looks between agency heads. Thompson had just confirmed the existence of operations that violated numerous laws and protocols, but he had done it to save lives that only Elena's network could protect. General Hayes called for quiet. Ladies and gentlemen, we have 72 hours to prevent a coordinated attack on American military installations. Whatever questions we have about intelligence sources can be addressed after we've protected our people. CIA Director Chen spoke up. General, with respect, if we're acting on intelligence from unacknowledged sources, we need to understand the reliability and potential compromise of those sources. Thompson stood up from his chair. Director Chen, in the past 6 months, intelligence from these sources has prevented attacks in Somalia, Nigeria, and Afghanistan. It has enabled the rescue of 14 American hostages and the disruption of 3 weapons smuggling operations. The reliability has been 100%. And the oversight? Thompson looked around the room one final time, understanding that his career was probably over, but that American lives hung in the balance. There has been no congressional oversight, because these operations exist in the spaces where official intelligence can't operate. They exist because bureaucratic processes move too slowly to save lives in real time. The Secretary of Defense stood up. Admiral Thompson, are you prepared to brief Congress on these operations? I'm prepared to do whatever is necessary to protect American military personnel from attack. General Hayes looked at her watch. We have 71 hours to coordinate defensive measures for 3 military bases. Admiral Thompson, I want your intelligence sources to provide real-time updates on terrorist movements. Director Chen, I want CIA assets to verify and supplement this intelligence through official channels. And after the crisis is over? Secretary Morrison asked. Thompson looked out the window at the American flag flying over the Pentagon. After the crisis is over, sir, we'll deal with the consequences of doing what was necessary to save American lives. 72 hours later, coordinated raids at 3 locations prevented the attacks exactly as Elena's network had predicted. 43 terrorists were arrested, and weapons caches were seized before they could be deployed. The official after-action reports credited excellent interagency cooperation and outstanding intelligence work. But Thompson knew the truth. Elena Vasquez, who had died 6 months earlier, had saved hundreds of American lives one final time through the network she had spent 30 years building in the shadows. The congressional hearings that followed would end Thompson's official career, but they would also begin the process of integrating Elena's network into official intelligence channels, ensuring that future threats could be addressed without requiring officers to choose between following orders and saving. Yes, in her final intelligence report, Elena had written a single line that Thompson now understood completely. Sometimes the most important service to your country happens in the spaces between what's legal and what's necessary. Admiral Thompson would spend the rest of his life ensuring that Elena Vasquez and her fellow Nightingale operatives received the recognition they had earned through decades of silent service, and in that future, generations of American soldiers would benefit from the network she had died to protect.